The dust never settled in this place. Corporal Elena Voss had learned that within her first week at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, tucked into the barren hills of a country that had forgotten the meaning of peace. The fine particles worked their way into everything. The seams of her uniform, the corners of her laptop screen, the spaces between her teeth when she forgot to keep her mouth shut during the daily sandstorms. But it was the dust in her lungs that bothered her most, the way it made every breath feel slightly insufficient, like the air itself was rationed. She sat hunched over her desk in the intelligence tent, surrounded by monitors that glowed blue-white in the perpetual dimness. The tent's walls rippled with each gust of wind, creating shadows that danced across classified documents and satellite imagery. Elena Baralai noticid animore. Her focus remained locked on the screen before her, tracking movement patterns across a grid map that represented 30 square miles of hostile territory. The door flap burst open, and Lieutenant Brad Kessler strode in with the confident swagger of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. His seal trident gleamed on his chest, polished to perfection despite the environment that dulled everything else. 3 of his team members followed, their presence filling the small space with an energy that felt both protective and predatory. Elena didn't look up. She had learned this too in her months here, that eye contact invited conversation, and conversation led to questions she had no interest in answering. Kessler approached her desk anyway, his boots heavy on the plywood flooring. She could smell the gun oil and sweat that clung to him, the scent of men who lived at the edge of violence and felt most comfortable there. Need the latest intel on Grid Sector 79er, Kessler announced, not asked. His voice carried the assumption that support personnel existed solely to serve his immediate needs. Elena's fingers continued moving across her keyboard, finishing the data compilation she had started before his interruption. "Give me 2 minutes," she replied quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the equipment. Kessler leaned against her desk, his weight causing it to creak. Behind him, one of his teammates, a stocky man with sergeant stripes named Wolf, smirked. "We've got movement in 30, sweetheart. 2 minutes might be too long." The word sweetheart landed like a pebble dropped into still water, creating ripples of condescension that spread through the tent. Elena felt her jaw tighten, but her expression remained neutral. She had heard worse, much worse. In the 5 months since her transfer to this base, she had become fluent in the language of dismissal, the casual disrespect that combat personnel reserve for those they deemed less essential to the mission. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've seen military families in your community, or perhaps you've witnessed acts of quiet strength that went unrecognized until the crucial moment arrived. Elena hit a final key, and the printer in the corner whirred to life. The latest satellite imagery and signal intelligence rolled out in crisp detail, annotated with her analysis. She stood, pulling the sheets free, and turned to face Kessler for the first time. He was taller than her by 6 inches, broader by 50 pounds of muscle. His eyes swept over her with the kind of assessment that reduced people to categories: useful or useless, threat or non-threat. She knew which category she occupied in his estimation. "Grid Sector 79er," she said, handing him the documents. 3 possible hostile positions marked in red. High confidence on the coordinates based on communications intercept from the last 72 hours. Recommend approach from the northwest to minimize exposure. Kessler took the papers without thanking her, his eyes already scanning the information. Wolf moved closer, reading over his lieutenant's shoulder. After a moment, Kessler grunted, something that might have indicated approval or merely acknowledgement. "This is good work," he admitted, though the words seemed to cost him something. "Where'd you learn to read terrain like this?" Elena returned to her chair, already pulling up the next task on her screen. The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications she had no intention of exploring. "Training," she answered simply. It was not a lie. It was merely incomplete, like most truths that people chose to share about themselves. The full answer would have required explaining things she had buried deep, experiences she revisited only in the dark hours before dawn, when sleep proved impossible and memory became unavoidable. Kessler folded the papers and tucked them into his vest. His team had already moved toward the exit, eager to begin their mission. As he turned to follow them, he paused, glancing back at Elena's hunched form in front of the glowing screens. "You ever get tired of being stuck in here?" he asked. The question carried a strange quality, hovering somewhere between genuine curiosity and subtle mockery. Elena's fingers stilled on the keyboard. For a moment, she considered telling him the truth, that she chose this tent, this desk, this distance from the action, that she had earned the right to choose, paid for it in ways that still woke her gasping in the night. Instead, she simply shook her head. "This is where I'm needed," she replied. Kessler shrugged and left, the door flap falling shut behind him. The tent returned to its usual quiet, broken only by the electronic hum and the whisper of wind against canvas. Elena sat motionless, staring at her reflection in the darkened portion of her screen. The woman looking back at her seemed small, ordinary, forgettable. Wire-rimmed glasses perched on a thin nose. Brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun. Skin that had gone pale from months spent indoors, analyzing data while others moved through the sun-baked landscape beyond the wire. She had worked hard to become this person, this harmless intelligence analyst who drew no special attention. It had taken discipline to shed the physical markers of her previous life, to let muscle memory fade and calluses soften. But some things could not be erased so easily. Her hands, resting now on the keyboard, still moved with a steadiness that no amount of intentional softening could fully disguise. Elena pulled up a new file, one she kept encrypted behind 3 layers of security protocols that exceeded even the base's classified standards. The document contained a single name and a photograph: Reza Ahmadi, the man who had led the ambush that killed her spotter, her team leader, and 6 other members of her reconnaissance unit 14 months ago in the mountains north of here. She had been the only survivor, the only witness. And when the official report had been filed and the medals distributed to the families of the dead, she had made a choice. Not revenge, she told herself. Justice. But the distinction felt increasingly thin as time passed and opportunity drew closer. Her secure phone buzzed. A text from the operations center. Hostile comms chatter increasing in Sector 79er. Possible coordinated movement. Elena's pulse quickened slightly, the first real spike of adrenaline she had felt in weeks. She pulled up the latest intercepts, her eyes moving rapidly across the translated text. The patterns were there, subtle but unmistakable. Someone was organizing, planning, preparing for something larger than the usual harassment operations. And woven through the communications, appearing with enough frequency to be significant, but not so often as to be obvious, was a call sign she recognized: Alcanis, the sniper. Reza Ahmadi's nom de guerre. Elena's hands began to move across her keyboard with renewed purpose, pulling data streams, cross-referencing positions, building a picture of movement and intention that would have impressed her old team leader. She worked through the afternoon and into the evening, ignoring the dinner call, ignoring everything except the growing certainty in her gut that something was building in the hills beyond the wire. When she finally leaned back in her chair, the tent had grown dark except for the glow of her monitors. Outside, she could hear the evening prayer call from the nearby village, the sound carrying clearly across the desert air. She closed her eyes and let the familiar Arabic wash over her, remembering another time, another base, when such sounds had meant something different. Her phone buzzed again. Kessler's team had made contact with hostiles in grid sector 79er. 3 enemy combatants down. No friendly casualties. Mission successful. Elena read the message twice, then archived it. She pulled up the map again, studying the location of the engagement, the direction of enemy retreat, the possible safe houses and supply routes they might use. She was still hunting. She had never stopped. The difference was that now, she hunted from a desk with satellites and signals intelligence instead of a rifle scope. It was safer this way. cleaner, less likely to resurrect the parts of herself she had worked so hard to bury. But as she studied the terrain on her screen, her right hand drifted unconsciously to her shoulder, fingers tracing the outline of a scar hidden beneath her uniform. The bullet that had torn through her rotator cuff had ended her official career as a sniper. The doctors said she would never achieve the necessary stability for long-range precision shooting again. The doctors have been wrong about many things. Elena saved her work, encrypted the files, and shut down her station. As she stood to leave, her eyes caught on a small photograph taped to the edge of her desk. 7 faces smiled back at her, young and confident, taken before a training exercise that seemed impossibly distant now. She had been in the center of that group, surrounded by her team, her family. All dead now, all except her. She touched the photograph gently, a nightly ritual that had become both comfort and reminder. Then she turned off the lights and stepped out into the desert night, where the stars blazed with an intensity that the city dwellers back home would never believe. The air had cooled rapidly with the setting sun, and she pulled her jacket tighter. Tomorrow would bring new intelligence, new patterns to analyze, new pieces of the puzzle that would eventually lead her to Alcanis. She could be patient. She had learned patience in the hardest school imaginable. But patience had limits. And somewhere out in those dark hills, the man who had killed her team was planning his next operation. When a moment came, when all the pieces finally aligned, Elena Voss would be ready. She had been ready for 14 months. The morning briefing started at 0600, and Elena arrived early as always. The operations center smelled of stale coffee and the particular strain of exhaustion that came from too many consecutive deployment rotations. Major Hendricks stood at the front of the room, his face drawn in the harsh fluorescent lighting, organizing papers that would outline the day's missions. Elena took her usual seat in the back corner, positioning herself where she could see everyone but where she would not be particularly noticed. It was a habit from another life, one she maintained even now. Awareness without prominence. Observation without engagement. The room filled quickly with personnel from various units. Kessler and his SEAL team occupied the front row with the casual confidence of men who knew their value. Behind them sat Army Rangers, Force Recon Marines, and a smattering of intelligence specialists like herself. The hierarchy was unspoken but absolute. Operators first, support staff as an afterthought. Major Hendricks called the room to order with a sharp clearing of his throat. Listen up. We've got a developing situation that requires immediate attention. He clicked a remote, and the projection screen behind him flickered to life with a topographical map Elena recognized immediately. Grid sectors 79er through 82 have shown increased hostile activity over the past 72 hours. We're seeing coordinated movement patterns that suggest a significant operation in planning. Elena's attention sharpened. This was her analysis, her data, now being presented to the room. She waited to see if Hendricks would acknowledge her contribution. He did not. Kessler raised his hand slightly, not waiting for permission to speak. My team engaged 3 hostiles in 79er yesterday evening. They scattered northwest. Could be regrouping. Affirmative, Hendricks confirmed. Which is why we're tasking multiple reconnaissance patrols for the next 48 hours. We need eyes on those hills, confirmation of numbers and intent. He paused, his expression hardening. We also have reason to believe that a high-value target may be operating in the area. Reza Ahmadi, known as Alcanis. The name hit Elena like a physical blow, though her face betrayed nothing. Around the room, other personnel leaned forward with interest. Ahmadi's reputation preceded him. Ghost sniper, resistance cell leader, responsible for dozens of coalition casualties over the past 3 years. Intel suggests he's been moving between safe houses in the region. Hendricks continued. If we can locate and neutralize him, it would significantly disrupt enemy operations. He clicked to the next slide, showing a grainy photograph of a man in his 40s with a weathered face and calculating eyes. Elena had memorized that photograph long ago. She knew every line, every shadow. She had studied it with an intensity that went beyond professional interest into something darker, more personal. Captain Reeves from Force Recon spoke up. What's the confidence level on his location? Hendricks glanced toward the back of the room, his eyes finding Elena. Corporal Voss has been tracking communications and movement patterns. She indicated high probability he's within our operational radius. Every head in the room turned to look at her. Elena felt the weight of their attention, the mixture of skepticism and dismissal that often greeted her assessments. She stood slowly, moving to the front with measured steps that gave no indication of the adrenaline coursing through her system. Based on signals intelligence and pattern analysis over the past 6 weeks, she began, her voice steady and professional. We've identified a network of safe houses and supply routes consistent with a command-level operative. The communications intercepts include references to alcanas with sufficient frequency to establish probable presence. She clicked through several slides, showing data visualizations and mapping overlays that represented weeks of meticulous work. Kisla interrupted. How solid is this intel? We can't afford to chase ghosts out there. Elena met his gaze without flinching. The methodology is sound. Cross-referenced signals intelligence with human intelligence reports, satellite imagery, and historical pattern analysis. Confidence level is 73%, which exceeds the threshold for actionable intelligence. 73 isn't exactly a guarantee, Wolf muttered from his seat, loud enough for others to hear. No intelligence is a guarantee, Sergeant, Elena replied calmly. But this represents the strongest lead we've had on Ahmadi's location in 18 months. The data supports immediate reconnaissance to confirm or deny his presence. Major Hendricks nodded, which is exactly what we're doing. Multiple teams will deploy at staggered intervals throughout the day, maintain communication protocols, and report any contact immediately. He looked around the room. This is a high-priority target. We do this right, we could save a lot of lives. The briefing continued with tactical details and assignment confirmations. Elena returned to her seat, feeling the familiar hollowness that came with discussing Ahmadi as if he were merely another name on a target list. To everyone else in this room, he was a strategic objective. To her, he was a man who had smiled while her spotter bled out beside her. After the briefing concluded, Elena made her way back to the intelligence tent. The morning sun had already begun to heat the air, promising another day of sweltering temperatures and dust. She was halfway across the compound when Kessler caught up with her. "Hold up, Corporal," he called. She stopped, turning to face him. His expression was different from their previous interactions, less dismissive, more evaluative. "That was solid work in there," he said. "The intelligence brief. Most analysts just throw numbers at us without understanding the operational context. You clearly know your stuff." "Thank you, sir," Elena replied neutrally. Kessler studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You ever work with field teams before? You got the language down, the way you think about terrain and movement. That's not something you pick up from a manual." The question hung between them, dangerous in its implications. Elena felt the old instinct to deflect, to maintain the careful distance she had constructed around her past. "I've had comprehensive training," she answered. "Nothing more, nothing less." He did not look entirely convinced, but he nodded. "Well, whatever your background, we're going to need that analytical mind sharp over the next few days. If Ahmadi is really out there, we need every advantage we can get." "Understood, sir." Kessler hesitated, then added, "My team deploys at 1400. If you're monitoring comms and notice anything unusual, anything at all, I want to know immediately. Don't wait for scheduled reports." "You'll be my priority," Elena confirmed. He started to walk away, then turned back. "One more thing. The guys can be rough sometimes, the way they talk. Don't take it personally. It's just how they cope with the stress." Elena allowed herself the smallest of smiles. "How about thick skin, Lieutenant? I can handle it." After he left, she stood alone in the compound, watching dust devils spiral across the open ground beyond the wire. Thick skin. If only he knew how thick, how many layers of scar tissue both literal and metaphorical, she had accumulated over the years. Inside the intelligence tent, she immersed herself in the work. The hours passed in a blur of data streams and pattern recognition, building and rebuilding the picture of Ahmadi's network. By early afternoon, she had identified 3 additional locations worth investigating, refinements based on overnight communications intercepts. At 1350, Kessler's team filed past her tent on their way to the staging area. She watched them through the open flap. These men who moved with such certainty toward danger. They carried their weapons with casual familiarity, wore their body armor like second skin, existed in a world of direct action and immediate consequences. She had been one of them once. Not a SEAL, but a sniper, which carried its own particular status among operators. She remembered the weight of her rifle, the way time seemed to slow when looking through the scope, the absolute calm that descended in the moment before the trigger pull. Elena forced the memories down and returned to her screens. At 1400 precisely, she received confirmation that Kessler's team had departed the wire. She pulled up the communications monitoring system, setting alerts for any transmissions from their designated frequencies. The afternoon crawled by. At 1630, the first report came through. Kessler's team had reached their observation position overlooking a suspected safe house in grid sector 81. No visual contact with hostiles yet. They were settling in for extended surveillance. Elena acknowledged the report and continued working. At 1715, her phone buzzed with a priority alert. She grabbed it immediately, her pulse quickening. The message was from the signals intelligence team at the main operations center. Intercepted communication, high-confidence hostile origin, multiple references to American forces, possible awareness of surveillance teams. Elena's hands flew across her keyboard, pulling up the raw intercept data. The conversation had been brief, conducted in a regional dialect she understood perfectly. 2 voices, both male, discussing movement in the hills. And then, buried in the middle of the exchange, a single phrase that made her blood run cold. They're watching us, but we are watching them. Someone knew. The enemy had detected the reconnaissance teams. Elena grabbed her secure radio, switching to Kessler's frequency. Vanguard 6, this is Oracle 2, she transmitted, using the operational call signs. Be advised, intercepted hostile communications suggest possible compromise of surveillance operations. Recommend heightened alert status. The radio crackled with static. Then Kessler's voice came through tense and clipped. Oracle 2, copy that. We've got movement below our position. Multiple contacts. Looks like they're packing to move. Can you confirm count and armament? Negative. We're too far out for positive ID. But they're in a hurry. This wasn't planned movement. This is reaction to something. Elena's mind raced through possibilities. If the enemy knew about the surveillance teams, they might be preparing an ambush or relocating their operations. Either way, the mission was compromised. Stand by, Vanguard 6. Consulting with Operations Center. She switched frequencies and contacted Major Hendricks, briefing him rapidly on the intercepts and the situation developing in Grid Sector 81. His response was immediate. All reconnaissance teams were to maintain position but heighten alert status. Air support was being spun up as a precautionary measure. Elena relayed the orders to Kessler, then sat back in her chair, staring at the map on her screen. Something felt wrong. The pieces fit together too neatly, as if the enemy wanted to be discovered rushing to evacuate. It was the kind of behavior that drew attention, pulled resources toward one location, which meant attention was being drawn away from somewhere else. She pulled up the communications intercepts again, this time looking not at what was said, but at what was missing. The network she had been tracking for weeks showed normal activity levels, except for one notable exception. The call sign associated with Alcanas had gone silent for the past 18 hours. Radio silence from a command element during a crisis was unusual, unless the command element was preparing for something that required absolute operational security. Elena's fingers trembled slightly as she pulled up satellite imagery of the surrounding sectors, looking for any indication of what she was beginning to fear. The intercept had mentioned watching the watchers. What if Amadi was not fleeing? What if he was hunting? Her secure phone buzzed again. Another intercept, this one even more fragmentary. A single transmission, brief and encrypted, but the voice signature analysis matched recordings she had studied for months. Reza Amadi, speaking calmly, quietly, giving orders. And he was close. Very close. Elena's hands moved with practiced efficiency across her keyboard, isolating the voice signature from the latest intercept and running it through every analysis protocol available. The matches came back with 92% confidence. Reza Amadi was not only in the area, he was actively coordinating operations. The question was what kind of operations and against whom. She pulled up the positions of all friendly forces in the field. Kessler's team in Grid Sector 8-1, 2 Army Ranger patrols in Sectors 7-8 and 8-3, a Force Recon element positioned north in Sector 8-5. All of them spread across the hills in a loose net designed to gather intelligence and locate high-value targets. All of them potentially exposed. Elena switched back to Kessler's frequency. Vanguard 6, Oracle 2. What's your current situation? The response came after a long pause. Kessler's voice barely above a whisper. Oracle 2, we've got approximately 8 to 10 hostiles below our position. They've loaded into 2 vehicles and are preparing to move. Requesting permission to follow at distance. Negative, Vanguard 6. Hold position. Elena's mind raced through tactical considerations. If the hostiles were evacuating, following them could lead to their network. But if this was a feint, pursuit would pull Kessler's team out of their defensive position and into potential danger. Stand by for further guidance. She contacted the operations center again. Major Hendricks answered immediately, his voice tight with the stress of managing multiple teams in fluid situations. Go ahead, Corporal. Sir, I have concerns about the developing situation. The intercept analysis suggests possible hostile awareness of our force disposition. The activity in 8-1 may be designed to draw a response and expose our teams to ambush. Hendricks was silent for a moment. What's your recommendation? Consolidate forces, sir. Pull the reconnaissance teams back to more defensible positions until we have better clarity on hostile intentions. The intelligence value of continued surveillance is outweighed by the risk if my assessment is correct. That's a significant call, Corporal. You're suggesting we abort multiple missions based on a hunch. Not a hunch, sir. Pattern analysis based on known tactics employed by this particular hostile element. Amadi has used false evacuation scenarios in the past to lure coalition forces into prepared kill zones. Another pause. How certain are you? 70 to 80%, sir. But the consequence of being wrong is measured in casualties. Hendricks exhaled slowly. All right, I'm ordering a general pullback to secondary positions. All teams will consolidate and reassess. Pass the word to Vanguard 6 and monitor the situation. If this blows back, it's on both of us. Understood, sir. Elena switched frequencies, her heart hammering despite her outward calm. Vanguard 6, Oracle 2. New orders. Execute tactical withdrawal to secondary position. All reconnaissance elements are pulling back. Kessler's response was sharp with frustration. Oracle 2, we've got eyes on multiple hostiles. This is exactly what we came out here for. Recommend we maintain observation. Vanguard 6, orders are firm. Intelligence assessment indicates possible ambush scenario. You're directed to withdraw immediately. The radio went silent for a beat. Then, roger that, Oracle 2. Vanguard 6 is moving. Out. Elena coordinated the withdrawal of all field teams over the next 20 minutes, watching their GPS transponders on her screen as they pulled back from their exposed positions. The Rangers moved first, their vehicles churning dust as they navigated the rough terrain back toward base. The Force Recon element followed, maintaining tactical spacing and overwatch positions. Kessler's team was the last to move. They had the furthest to travel and the most difficult terrain to cover. Elena tracked their progress with single-minded focus, aware that every minute they spent in the field increased their vulnerability if her assessment was correct. At 1800 hours, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert landscape. Elena received an alert from the signals intelligence team. New intercept, multiple hostile transmissions, high volume of traffic. She pulled up the data, her stomach tightening as she scanned the translated content. The transmissions were coordinated, synchronized, orders being given, positions being reported. It was the signature of a military operation in execution, and all of it was converging on Grid Sector 81, the exact location where Kessler's team had been positioned less than 30 minutes ago. Elena grabbed her radio. Vanguard 6, Oracle 2. Urgent. Multiple hostile transmissions indicate coordinated movement toward your previous observation position. How far out are you? Vanguard 6 to Oracle 2. We're approximately 2 clicks from EOP. We've got good cover, and we're moving at combat speed. What's the threat assessment? Multiple enemy elements, potentially squad strength or larger, moving to the position you just vacated. If you'd stayed, you would be surrounded by now. Copy that. Kessler's voice carried a new quality, a grudging respect mixed with barely suppressed anger at how close they had come to disaster. Guess your analysis was solid. We'll maintain alert status and continue withdrawal. Stay sharp, Vanguard 6. They may have spotters tracking your movement. Elena continued monitoring as darkness fell over the base. The enemy transmissions continued, confirming what she had suspected. The hostile evacuation had been a trap designed to draw coalition forces into a prepared ambush site. If she had not recognized the pattern, if Hendricks had not trusted her assessment, Kessler and his team will be fighting for their lives right now. Or worse, at 1930, Kessler's team cleared the wire and returned to base. Elena heard their vehicles rumbling past her tent toward the motor pool. She remained at her station, continuing to monitor the situation. The hostile transmissions had decreased in frequency, suggesting frustration or confusion at finding their trap empty. 20 minutes later, her tent flap opened. Kessler stood in the entrance, his face streaked with dust and sweat, his eyes hard. He looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "You saved our lives out there," he said flatly. No embellishment, just a statement of fact. Elena turned in her chair to face him. "I was doing my job, Lieutenant." He stepped inside, letting the flap fall closed behind him. His team stayed outside, but she could see their shadows against the canvas. "Your job is analysis. What you did today was predict enemy tactics with the kind of accuracy that usually requires field experience. So I'm going to ask you again, and I'd appreciate an honest answer this time. What's your background?" Elena felt the wall she had carefully constructed beginning to crack. She could deflect again, maintain the fiction of being merely a well-trained analyst. But something had shifted today. Kessler had trusted her assessment, even when it contradicted his own observations. He had pulled his team back based on a recommendation, accepting the professional embarrassment of aborting a mission because she had asked him to. He deserved something closer to the truth. "I was reconnaissance," she said quietly. "Scout sniper platoon, attached to a Marine expeditionary unit. 14 months ago, my team was operating in the mountains about 60 clicks north of here. We were compromised and ambushed. I was the only survivor." Kessler's expression changed, understanding replacing curiosity. "The ambush at Checkpoint Griffin. I heard about that. 7 Kia. That was your team?" Elena nodded, unable to speak for a moment. The memories rushed back despite her efforts to contain them. The morning sun painting the mountains gold. The sudden crack of gunfire. Her spotter's final words. The long hours hiding in a ravine, bleeding and broken, waiting for rescue. "Jesus, Kessler, Briatid. And the guy we're hunting now, Amadi, he was responsible?" "Yes." Elena's voice was steady again, hardened by months of carrying this knowledge. "I've been tracking him ever since. That's why I'm here. That's why I volunteered for this assignment." Kessler pulled over a folding chair and sat down heavily. "Does Hendricks know?" "He knows I'm former reconnaissance. He doesn't know about my personal connection to the target. That's a hell of a conflict of interest, Corporal." "I'm aware, sir. But I'm also the person on this base who knows the most about Amadi's tactics, his patterns, his methods. Personal motivation aside, I'm an asset to this mission. Kessler studied her face, his tactical mind clearly working through the implications. How badly were you hurt in the ambush? Bad enough to be medically retired from field operations. Elena touched her right shoulder unconsciously. Bullet through the rotator cuff. Nerve damage. I can still shoot, but not with the precision required for long-range work. Or so the medical board determined. But you don't agree with their assessment. It wasn't a question. Elena met his gaze and said nothing, letting her silence serve as confirmation. Kessler leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. All right, here's how this is going to work. You continue doing exactly what you've been doing, analyzing intelligence, and keeping us alive with your predictions. But if we get a shot at Amadi, if this turns into an operation where your personal involvement could compromise the mission, you stay here. Behind the wire. Non-negotiable. Elena wanted to argue, to explain that she had earned the right to face the man who had destroyed her team. But Kessler was offering her something valuable, acknowledgement of her skills, and a place in the hunt, even if from a distance. She could accept those terms. For now. Understood, Lieutenant. He stood, preparing to leave, then paused at the entrance. What you did today, recognizing that trap, that was exceptional work. My team owes you. I owe you. He hesitated, then added, I'm sorry about your team. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Thank you, sir. After he left, Elena sat alone in the quiet tent, feeling something she had not experienced in months. Not quite hope, but perhaps its distant cousin. A sense that the long hunt might finally be approaching its conclusion. That justice, so long deferred, might finally be within reach. She pulled up her encrypted file on Amadi, studying his photograph once more. The man stared back at her from the screen, his eyes cold and calculating. He had no idea that one of his victims had survived, that she had been tracking him with patient, methodical precision, that every day brought her closer to the moment when accounts would finally be settled. Elena touched the photograph on her desk, the image of her fallen team. Soon, she whispered. Very soon. The night brought no relief from the heat, only a suffocating stillness that pressed down on forward operating base Sentinel like a physical weight. Elena lay in her bunk, staring at the canvas ceiling of her sleeping quarters, listening to the rhythmic breathing of the 3 other female personnel who shared the cramped space. Sleep remained elusive, as it had for most nights since the ambush. When she closed her eyes, she saw faces. Her spotter, Corporal Daniels, grinning as he adjusted their position. Staff Sergeant Ortega, her team leader, teaching her to read wind patterns in mountain terrain. Private Chun, the youngest of their unit, writing letters home that would never be sent. At 0300, Elena gave up on sleep entirely. She dressed quietly in the darkness and made her way to the intelligence tent. The base was quiet except for the sentries on the perimeter and the occasional vehicle patrol. Above, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small dramas of violence and survival playing out below. Inside the tent, the equipment hummed with patient electronic life. Elena powered up her station and immersed herself in data, seeking patterns in the chaos of intercepted communications and surveillance imagery. The failed ambush from yesterday had produced a wealth of new information. The enemy had committed significant resources to the trap, which meant they had considered the target valuable. It also meant they were becoming more aggressive, more willing to take risks. That kind of aggression usually signaled desperation or confidence. Elena needed to determine which. She pulled up satellite imagery from the hours following the attempted ambush, tracking vehicle movements and dispersal patterns. The enemy had scattered efficiently after discovering their trap empty, but not randomly. There was structure to their movements, discipline that suggested professional military training rather than improvised militia tactics. One vehicle in particular caught her attention, a civilian truck that had departed the ambush site and traveled northwest into more remote terrain before the satellite coverage lapsed. Elena enhanced the images, studying the vehicle's load profile and passenger count. 2 individuals visible in the cab, possibly more in the covered bed. The vehicle had moved with purpose, taking routes that avoided main roads and coalition observation posts. Command element, Elena muttered to herself. Someone important enough to warrant careful extraction. She cross-referenced the vehicle's route with known safe houses and supply caches in the region, building a probability map of potential destinations. 3 locations emerged as likely candidates, all of them in terrain that would require significant effort to reach and surveil. The tent flap opened behind her. Elena turned to find Major Hendricks entering, a cup of coffee in each hand. He offered one to her. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, settling into a chair beside her workstation. "Too much to process, sir." Elena accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. Hendricks studied her screens for a moment. "What have you got?" Elena walked him through her analysis, showing the vehicle movement and the probability mapping. Hendricks listened intently, his expression growing more focused as she explained her reasoning. "You think Amati was at that ambush site?" he asked when she finished. "I think someone important was there, and whoever it was left in a hurry when the trap failed. The discipline and coordination required to set up that kind of operation suggests command-level oversight. Combined with the communications intercepts we've collected, it fits Amati's profile." Hendricks sipped his coffee, considering. "If you're right, and he's moved to one of these 3 locations, we have an opportunity. But it's also a risk. We burned him once yesterday. He's going to be more cautious now, more alert to surveillance. Which is why we need to move carefully," Elena agreed. "Standard reconnaissance will be too obvious. We need something more subtle. What are you suggesting?" Elena pulled up a detailed terrain map of the 3 candidate locations. The northernmost site sits in a valley with limited approach routes. Air surveillance would be spotted immediately, and ground teams would be channeled into predictable paths. But there's a ridgeline here. She indicated a position on the map, approximately 1,500 meters from the structure. A skilled observer team could establish position overnight and maintain surveillance without being detected. 1,500 meters, Hendricks repeated. "That's long-range work. We need someone with serious skill to make accurate assessments from that distance." Their eyes met, and Elena saw the question forming before he asked it. She had opened the door to this conversation last night when she revealed her background to Kessler. Now it was leading to places she had told herself she would not go. "Corporal Voss," Hendricks said carefully, "I know you were a scout sniper before your injury. I know you were one of the best in your unit. But I also know what the medical board determined about your capabilities. Are you suggesting something I should be concerned about?" Elena set down her coffee cup, choosing her words with precision. "I'm suggesting that this mission requires specialized capabilities, sir. Whether I possess those capabilities or not is a question that could be answered empirically if given the opportunity." "That's not an answer. That's a dodge." "Yes, sir, it is." Elena met his gaze steadily. "Because if I tell you that I've been maintaining my skills privately, that I've been working to overcome the limitations the medical board identified, that I can still make shots they said were impossible, then you're in a position where you have to either use that information or ignore it. Either way becomes complicated." Hendricks leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "You've thought about this?" "Every day, for 14 months, sir." The major was quiet for a long moment, weighing considerations that Elena could only guess at. Finally, he spoke. "Tomorrow morning, 0800, I want you at the range. Bring whatever equipment you need. We're going to test your theoretical capabilities. If you can demonstrate the skill level required for this kind of work, we'll discuss next steps. If not, you stay behind your desk. Fair?" "More than fair, sir." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Hendricks stood, leaving his coffee cup on her desk. "If this goes wrong, if you're injured or killed because I let you go back into the field, that's on me. I need to know you can do this, not hope or believe, but know. Understood?" "Understood, sir." After he left, Elena sat in the quiet tent, feeling her heart race with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. She had been preparing for this possibility without admitting it to herself, maintaining her strength and conditioning through solitary workouts, practicing breathing techniques, and triggered discipline in the privacy of her quarters. But there was a vast difference between private preparation and public demonstration. The injury to her shoulder had been severe, the kind of trauma that ended careers for snipers who depended on absolute stability for precision work. The surgeons had done excellent work, but nerve damage was unpredictable. She had regained most of her range of motion and strength through dedicated rehabilitation, but the medical board's assessment had been based on standardized testing that did not account for adaptation and compensation. Elena had learned to work around her limitations, to modify her technique in ways that accommodated the slight tremor that still affected her right arm under stress. It had taken months of secret practice, hundreds of rounds fired when no one was watching, endless repetition until her body remembered what her damaged nerves tried to forget. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen. As dawn approached, Elena continued her analysis, refining the targeting packages for all 3 suspected safe house locations. She included detailed terrain studies, approach routes, observation positions, and risk assessments. If she passed Hendrix's test tomorrow, this information would form the basis for the operation. If she failed, at least the intelligence would be available for someone else to use. At 0600, she finally left the tent to grab breakfast and prepare for the morning. The mess hall was beginning to fill with personnel starting their day. She saw Kessler and his team at a corner table, their conversation animated as they reviewed maps and discussed tactics. Wolf noticed her and nodded in acknowledgement, a gesture of respect that would have been unthinkable 2 days ago. Elena collected her food and found a quiet spot to eat alone, as was her habit. She was halfway through her meal when Kessler approached, carrying his tray. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She gestured to the empty seat across from her. Kessler sat down, attacking his breakfast with the efficient hunger of someone who burned calories as a matter of professional routine. "Heard you've got something interesting developing," he said between bites. "Hendrix mentioned you identified a possible location for our friend." 3 possible locations, Elena corrected. "We're working to narrow it down." "And I heard something else," Kessler continued, lowering his voice. "Something about a range demonstration this morning. You planning to show off some skills?" "Word travels fast," Elena observed. "This is a small base, Corporal, and when someone like Hendrix schedules an unusual training event, people notice." He studied her face. "You really think you can still do the work? Long-range precision after that kind of injury? I guess we'll find out." Kessler nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I hope you can. We could use someone with your analytical mind and field experience. It's a rare combination." He paused, then added, "But don't push yourself into something that could get you killed just to prove a point. There's no shame in accepting limitations." Elena appreciated the sentiment, even as she rejected its premise. Limitations were often just untested assumptions, boundaries that existed only because no one had tried to cross them. "I'll be careful, Lieutenant." "But careful doesn't mean timid." "Fair enough." Kessler finished his breakfast and stood. "Good luck out there. And if you pass whatever test Hendrix has planned, my team would be honored to work with you." After he left, Elena sat alone with her coffee, watching the morning sun paint the eastern sky in shades of amber and gold. In a few hours, she would know whether the past 14 months of private struggle and determination had been enough, whether she could reclaim even a piece of what had been taken from her in those mountains where her team had died, whether she could become, once more, the weapon she had been trained to be. The range at Forward Operating Base Sentinel occupied a desolate stretch of ground beyond the motor pool, where the desert stretched toward distant hills in waves of tan and ochre. Elena arrived 15 minutes early, carrying a hard case that had remained locked in her personal storage since her arrival at the base. Inside was her rifle, a weapon she had not touched in months, but had cleaned and maintained with religious devotion every week nonetheless. Major Hendrix was already present, along with the base's senior marksmanship instructor, Gunny Sergeant Raleigh, a weathered Marine with 30 years of service and eyes that missed nothing. 2 range safety officers stood nearby, and to Elena's surprise, Kessler and 3 members of his team were also in attendance. "Corporal Voss," Hendrix greeted her formally. "Thank you for being punctual. Gunny Raleigh will be administering today's assessment." He's aware of your medical history and the circumstances that led to your transition from field operations. Raleigh stepped forward, his handshake firm and appraising. Mom, I've reviewed your service record. Impressive marksmanship scores before your injury. We're here to see if you've maintained those capabilities. No pressure, just honest assessment. Elena nodded, setting her case down and opening it with practiced movements. Her rifle lay nestled in foam padding, a precision instrument that had been an extension of herself in another life. She lifted it carefully, feeling the familiar weight settle into her hands. The weapon felt right, as if no time had passed since she last used it in anger. We'll start at 500 meters, Raleigh explained, gesturing toward the range. 3 targets, 5 rounds each. Standard accuracy test. Then we'll increase distance if your performance warrants it. He paused, his expression softening slightly. Take your time, getting comfortable. No ruse. Elena moved to the firing line, aware of every eye on her. She extended the rifle's bipod and settled into a prone position, feeling her body remember positions practiced 10,000 times. Her right shoulder twinged slightly as she brought the stock to her cheek, but the pain was manageable, familiar. She worked the bolt, chambering around, and looked through the scope. The first target appeared crisp and clear at 500 meters. She regulated her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow, her awareness narrowing to the space between herself and the target. The wind was minimal, perhaps 3 miles per hour from the west. Temperature, 82 degrees. Humidity low. All factors her mind calculated automatically. The first shot surprised her, as all good shots should. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, the report sharp in the morning air. Downrange, the target showed a fresh hole 3 inches from center. Elena adjusted, compensating for the slight pull she had detected. Her shoulder was stronger than she expected, the tremor less pronounced than during her last medical evaluation. She fired again. This time, the round struck 1 inch from center. The remaining 3 rounds at the first target clustered within a 2-inch group, all well within acceptable parameters. She shifted to the second target, repeated the process. Then the third. 15 rounds, 15 hits, all grouped tightly enough to satisfy military standards. Good shooting, Raleigh called out. Let's move to 800 meters. The targets at that distance required more careful consideration. Wind became more significant, bullet drop more pronounced. Elena settled back into position, making minute adjustments to her scope. She could feel the old rhythms returning, the almost meditative state where thought and action merged seamlessly. She fired the first round. It struck 2 inches left of center. She adjusted, fired again. Center mass. The remaining rounds followed in precise succession, each one finding its mark. Kessler moved closer to Hendricks, his voice low but audible. That's exceptional shooting for someone who's supposedly been behind a desk for over a year. Hendricks said nothing, his attention fixed on Elena. Raleigh consulted with the range safety officers, then returned. Corporal, we're going to move to 1,200 meters. That's beyond standard qualification distance. This is to assess your capability for specialized observation and precision engagement. Are you comfortable attempting shots at that range? Elena looked downrange to where barely visible targets sat in the shimmering heat. 1,200 meters was serious distance, the kind of range where environmental factors could turn a perfect shot into a complete miss. It was also the kind of range where true snipers distinguish themselves from merely good shooters. I'm comfortable, sir, she replied. She took her time at this distance, observing wind indicators, studying mirage effects through her scope, making calculations that were part science and part art. The first shot took nearly 3 minutes to prepare. When she finally fired, the round struck 4 inches high and left. Elena made adjustments and fired again. Closer, but still not center. The third round found its mark, dead center in the kill zone. She fired 2 more, both hits, both within acceptable tolerances for that extreme range. When she finished, she cleared her weapon and stood, suddenly aware of how much tension she had been carrying. Her shoulder ached, but it was the good ache of muscles worked hard, not the sharp pain of injury. Raleigh approached with a tablet showing the electronic target scoring. Corporal Voss, your performance today exceeded expectations. At 500 meters, you scored expert. At 800, you maintained expert qualification. At 1200 meters, you demonstrated capability consistent with advanced sniper training. He glanced at Hendricks. In my professional opinion, she's fully capable of long-range precision work. Hendricks nodded slowly, absorbing the assessment. His expression revealed nothing of his thoughts. Corporal, take a break. Hydrate. We'll debrief in 30 minutes. Elena secured her rifle and moved to the shade of a nearby structure, drinking water and allowing her body to cool. Kessler approached after a few minutes, his expression one of genuine respect. That was impressive work, he said. How long have you been practicing? Every chance I get, Elena admitted. Private ranges when I was stateside during recovery. Here, I've been dry firing, maintaining my fundamentals. The medical board said I couldn't do this anymore, but I wasn't willing to accept that without testing it myself. Stubborn, Kessler observed with a slight smile. I can respect that. So what happens now? Elena drank more water, considering the question. Now, we see if Major Hendricks decides the capability is worth the risk. 30 minutes later, they reconvened in a briefing room within the operations center. Hendricks had been joined by the base commander, Colonel Park, a compact woman with silver hair and a reputation for making hard decisions without hesitation. Corporal Voss, Colonel Park began without preamble. I've reviewed Gunny Raleigh's assessment and Major Hendricks's recommendations. Your shooting today was exemplary. However, we have concerns that extend beyond pure marksmanship capability. Elena remained standing at attention. Yes, ma'am. Your personal connection to the target, Reza Ahmadi, represents a significant complication. Revenge-motivated operations have a history of poor outcomes. We need soldiers who can make clear-headed tactical decisions, not individuals seeking personal vengeance. With respect, ma'am, Elena replied, my motivation for 14 months has been to ensure Ahmadi faces justice for the deaths of 7 Marines. That motivation has made me the single most knowledgeable person on this base regarding his tactics, his patterns, and his organization. I can separate personal feeling from professional obligation. Park studied her for a long moment. Major Hendricks believes you can. Lieutenant Kessler has vouched for your analytical capabilities and your tactical judgment. Gunny Raleigh confirms you have the technical skills. Against my better judgment, I'm inclined to authorize your participation in field operations on a provisional basis. Elena felt her pulse quicken but maintained her composure. Thank you, ma'am. Understand, Park continued, that you will be under constant evaluation. Lieutenant Kessler will have command authority over any operation you participate in, and if at any point he determines your judgment is compromised, you will be immediately withdrawn. Additionally, if we confirm Ahmadi's location, your primary role will be observation and intelligence gathering, not direct action. Are these terms acceptable? Yes, ma'am, Elena answered without hesitation. Very well. Dismissed. Outside the briefing room, Kessler caught up with Elena. Looks like you're officially back in the game. My team is planning a reconnaissance operation to the northernmost location you identified. We move out at 2020 tonight. Can you be ready? I've been ready for 14 months, Elena replied. Kessler nodded. Then let's go hunting. Elena spent the afternoon preparing equipment and reviewing intelligence. The northernmost safe house sat in a valley accessible only by foot, surrounded by terrain that offered both excellent cover for approach and multiple escape routes for occupants. It was exactly the kind of location a cautious commander would choose for a temporary headquarters. As evening approached and shadows lengthened across the base, Elena felt a familiar calm settling over her. This was not the frantic energy of revenge or the desperate need to prove herself. This was the quiet certainty of purpose, the knowledge that her skills and determination had finally aligned with opportunity. She cleaned her rifle one more time, loaded her magazines with precise care, and gathered her gear. When the sun finally set and darkness claimed the desert, she made her way to the staging area where Kessler's team was preparing to move. The hunt was beginning, and this time, Elena Voss would not be the prey. The night was moonless, which worked in their favor. Kessler's team moved through the darkness like shadows given purpose, their night vision equipment turning the black desert into a green-tinted landscape of depth and detail. Elena moved with them, her gear distributed across her body in a configuration she had perfected over years of field operations. The weight felt right, familiar, as if she had never stopped being a combat operator. They had inserted 2 kilometers from the target location, approaching on foot to minimize noise and maximize stealth. Kessler led the formation with Wolf and 2 other SEALs, Petty Officers Nakamura and Torres. Elena occupied the middle position, her rifle slung across her back, a sidearm on her hip. She moved with practiced silence, her boots finding purchase on the rocky terrain without dislodging loose stones or creating unnecessary sound. The landscape rose and fell in irregular waves, offering concealment but also limiting visibility. Every ridgeline could hide hostiles. Every depression could contain an ambush. Elena felt her awareness expand to encompass the entire tactical environment, processing sounds and shadows with a heightened perception that combat experience had burned into her nervous system. Kessler raised a fist, and the team froze. Elena dropped to one knee, scanning her sector through her night vision. In the distance, perhaps 300 meters ahead, she detected a faint glow. Not firelight, but the softer illumination of electric lamps powered by a generator. The safe house. Kessler motioned the team forward in a new formation, spreading them wider to present multiple angles of observation. They covered the remaining distance over the next 40 minutes, moving with excruciating slowness, pausing frequently to listen and observe. The generator's distant hum became audible as they approached, along with occasional voices speaking in Arabic. Elena's pulse remained steady, her breathing controlled. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the convergence of intelligence, opportunity, and capability. Somewhere in that structure ahead, Ahmadi might be present, the man who had orchestrated her team's deaths, the ghost she had been hunting for 14 months. The team reached the ridgeline Elena had identified during her analysis, a position approximately 1,500 meters from the target structure. Kessler signaled them into observation positions spread across 50 meters of elevated ground. Elena moved to the center position, the one offering the clearest line of sight to the building below. She unslung her rifle and set up with methodical precision. The bipod extended and stabilized. She checked her scope adjustments, confirmed her range estimation, noted wind direction and speed. Everything was as it should be. Through her scope, the safe house resolved into sharp detail despite the darkness. A single-story structure of concrete and wood, typical of rural construction in this region. 2 vehicles parked outside, both civilian trucks. No obvious security presence, but that meant nothing. Professional operators knew how to remain invisible. Vanguard 6 to Oracle 2, Kessler whispered into his radio, using her operational call sign. "We're in position. What do you see?" Elena studied the structure through her scope, noting every detail. 2 vehicles as expected. Generator running on the east side of the building. Single entrance visible from this angle, door currently closed. No external lighting beyond what spills from the windows. 3 windows show interior illumination. I count at least 4 distinct shadows moving inside, possibly more. Roger that. Maintain observation. I'm calling it in. While Kessler reported their position and findings to the operations center, Elena continued her surveillance. The discipline she had learned as a sniper returned effortlessly. Patience was the sniper's greatest weapon, the ability to remain motionless for hours while gathering information one small piece at a time. A door opened on the west side of the structure, previously invisible from her angle. A man stepped out, cigarette glowing in the darkness. Elena studied him through her scope. Mid-30s, wearing civilian clothes, carrying an AK-47 casually across his chest. He moved with the relaxed confidence of someone in friendly territory. The man was joined by a second individual, older, with a beard and wearing a traditional dishdasha. They spoke quietly, their conversation inaudible at this distance. Elena watched their body language, the way the younger man deferred to the older one. Hierarchy, respect. This was not a casual guard talking to a fellow soldier. This was a subordinate receiving instructions from someone important. Vanguard 6, Elena transmitted softly. Two individuals visible on west side of structure. One possible command level based on behavior and interaction patterns. Can you get a positive ID? Kessler asked. Negative, insufficient lighting and angle for facial recognition. But body language suggests seniority. The two men finished their conversation and the younger one moved away, conducting what appeared to be a perimeter check. The older man remained outside, smoking and looking toward the hills, toward Elena's position, though he could not possibly see them in the darkness. Elena felt a strange sensation, as if the man's gaze had found her across the impossible distance. She kept her scope steady, studying every detail she could discern. Height approximately 1.7 meters. Build consistent with middle age. Bearing suggested military experience. And something else, an indefinable quality that marked certain men who had spent years making life-and-death decisions. The man finished his cigarette and returned inside. Elena continued observing, cataloging vehicle descriptions, noting the arrival and departure of individuals, building a detailed picture of the safe house's occupation and security posture. Over the next 2 hours, she counted 7 distinct individuals, all male, all armed, all moving with tactical awareness. At 0 to 100, new activity drew her attention. One of the vehicles started up, its headlights cutting through the darkness. 2 men climbed into the cab, while 3 more loaded into the back. The vehicle departed, heading south toward the main road network. Vanguard 6, vehicle departing south with 5 occupants. Possible courier run or personnel rotation. Copy that. Nakamura, you getting this? Affirmative. Tracking on thermal. Vehicle maintaining steady speed. No indication of hostile intent toward our position. The remaining personnel in the safe house settled into what appeared to be a rest cycle. Lights were extinguished in 2 of the 3 illuminated rooms. Elena continued her vigil, fighting the fatigue that tried to creep into her awareness. This was the hardest part of surveillance work, maintaining concentration during the quiet hours when nothing seemed to be happening. Kessler moved up beside her, settling into a prone position. You doing okay? He whispered. Solide, Elena replied. This is what I was trained for. How's the shoulder holding up? No issues. The position was less strenuous than I expected. Adrenaline probably helping. Kessler was quiet for a moment, studying the safe house through his own optics. Think he's in there? Amadi? Elena had been asking herself the same question for the past 2 hours. Insufficient data for confirmation, but the security profile and behavior patterns are consistent with protecting a high-value individual. The deference shown to that older male outside suggests command presence. But you can't be sure. No, Elena admitted. I can't be sure. At 0400, the vehicle returned, its cargo bed now empty. The occupants entered the safe house, and within minutes, 2 different individuals emerged and loaded into the second vehicle. This one departed heading west, deeper into remote terrain. Pattern suggests shift rotation, Elena reported, maintaining security while allowing personnel rest cycles. Professional operation. Hendrix's voice came over the radio from the operations center. Oracle 2, based on your observations, what's your assessment of target value? Elena considered carefully before responding. Security profile indicates high-value location. Personnel count, armament, and operational discipline all consistent with protecting command-level asset. However, without positive identification, cannot confirm specific individual presence. Recommend continued surveillance with aerial reconnaissance at first light to establish broader movement patterns. Concur with that assessment, Hendricks replied. Vanguard 6, maintain position until dawn, then withdraw to standby location. We'll have a predator overhead by 0630. The team settled in for the remaining hours of darkness. Elena allowed herself to relax slightly, though she never fully abandoned her observation post. The sky began to pale in the east, darkness giving way to the soft gray of pre-dawn. The desert landscape emerged from shadow, revealing details invisible during the night. And that was when Elena saw him. The door opened, and a man stepped out to greet the morning. He moved stiffly, like someone unaccustomed to sleeping on hard surfaces. He stretched, his face turning toward the rising sun. And in that moment, as dawn light touched his features, Elena saw through her scope the face she had memorized from countless photographs and intelligence briefings. Reza Ahmadi. Her breath caught. Her heart, so controlled throughout the long night, suddenly hammered against her ribs. 14 months of hunting, of analyzing, of waiting, and here he was, less than 1,500 meters away, within range, within her capability to reach. Her finger moved unconsciously toward her trigger, muscle memory responding to target acquisition. The crosshairs settled on Ahmadi's chest. The shot was possible. Difficult at this range, complicated by morning thermals and uncertain wind conditions, but possible. She had made harder shots during training. Oracle 2, Kessler's voice in her earpiece brought her back to reality. Please confirm your status. Elena realized she had stopped breathing. She forced air into her lungs, forced her finger away from the trigger. Status green, she replied, her voice only slightly strained. Vanguard 6, I have positive identification on primary target. Reza Ahmadi confirmed present at location. Say again, Oracle 2. You have eyes on Ahmadi? Affirmative. Positive ID based on facial recognition. Target is currently outside structure, east side, stationary. Outstanding work. Hendrix's voice cut in. Maintain observation, but do not, repeat, do not, engage. We need to confirm no additional high-value targets and plan proper extraction or elimination operation. Elena understood the logic, even as every fiber of her being screamed to take the shot. This was not about revenge. This was about doing the mission correctly, professionally. Ahmadi was not going anywhere. They had found him. The rest could be planned properly. Copy that, she replied, maintaining observation only. But as she watched Ahmadi through her scope, as he stood unknowing in the morning light, Elena made a promise to herself and to the ghosts of her fallen team. Soon, very soon, this would end. The drone arrived overhead at 0630 as promised, invisible from the ground, but feeding high-resolution imagery directly to the operations center. Elena maintained her observation post, watching as Ahmadi moved through his morning routine with the casual confidence of someone who believed himself safe. He spoke with his men, inspected the vehicles, made phone calls on a satellite phone that Elena desperately wished they could intercept. Kessler moved between team positions, checking on his men and coordinating with command. When he reached Elena's position, he settled beside her with a canteen of water. Drink something. You've been on that scope for 7 hours straight. Elena accepted the water gratefully, though she kept her eyes on the target area even as she drank. Can't afford to miss anything. He might move at any moment. The Predator has him now. You can take a break. Kessler's voice carried both understanding and concern. I've seen that look before, Corporal. The one you're wearing right now. It's the look of someone who wants blood. Elena lowered the canteen, choosing her words carefully. I want justice, Lieutenant. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, the line looks pretty thin. Kessler gestured toward the safe house below. That man down there killed your team. I get it. But if you're going to be part of this operation, I need to know you won't compromise the mission because of personal feelings. I passed Colonel Park's evaluation, Elena replied. I passed your tests. I've followed every order given. What more do you need? I need to know that when the moment comes, you'll take the shot because it's tactically necessary, not because you've been waiting 14 months for payback. Kessler's expression was serious, but not unkind. I'm not questioning your skill or your courage. I'm questioning whether revenge is clouding your judgment. Elena met his gaze directly. Every action I've taken since that ambush has been about bringing Ahmadi to justice through proper channels. I could have gone rogue months ago, tracked him down myself, put a bullet in him, and damn the consequences. Instead, I worked within the system. I provided intelligence. I maintained discipline. I waited for the right opportunity to present itself. Does that sound like someone ruled by emotion? Kessler considered this, then nodded slowly. Fair point. But Corporal, when we move on this target, and we will move soon, I need you to remember that we're here to neutralize a threat to coalition forces, not to settle personal scores. Can you do that? Yes, sir. I can do that. The radio crackled with Hendrix's voice. All Vanguard elements, be advised. Based on drone surveillance and Oracle 2's intelligence analysis, we're greenlighting an operation to capture or kill Amati. Planning session at 1400 back at base. Vanguard 6, begin withdrawal at your discretion. Roger that, Kessler responded. Vanguard 6 beginning withdrawal. Out. He looked at Elena. Let's get out of here. We've got work to do. The team pulled back from their positions with the same careful discipline they had used to approach. Elena took one last look through her scope at Amati, committing every detail to memory, then secured her rifle and followed Kessler down the ridgeline. The sun had risen fully now, and the temperature was climbing rapidly. Sweat soaked through her uniform as they moved. They reached their extraction point 2 hours later, where vehicles waited to transport them back to base. Elena climbed into the lead vehicle, her body finally registering the fatigue of a sleepless night and the sustained tension of surveillance. But her mind remained sharp, already thinking ahead to the operation being planned. Back at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, she had barely enough time to clean her weapon, shower, and grab food before the 1400 briefing. The operations center was packed with personnel from multiple units. Colonel Park stood at the front with Major Hendrix. Drone imagery from a morning surveillance played on multiple screens. Colonel Park called the room to order. Gentlemen and lady, we have a high-value target confirmed at grid reference Aton-47. Reza Ahmadi, responsible for numerous coalition casualties, including the checkpoint Griffin ambush last year. Based on current intelligence, he appears to be using this location as a temporary command post. Our mission is to capture or kill him before he relocates. She clicked to the next slide, showing a tactical overview. This will be a joint operation. SEAL team elements will provide assault capability. Force Recon will establish outer cordon and cut off escape routes. We'll have close air support on standby and medevac position for rapid response. She paused, looking directly at Elena. Corporal Voss will provide precision overwatch from an elevated position. Given her extensive knowledge of the target and demonstrated capabilities, she's our best asset for this role. Elena felt every eye in the room turn toward her. Some looked skeptical, others curious, a few openly hostile. She kept her expression neutral, professional. Kiss las tout. Ma'am, my team will be the primary assault element. I recommend we move tonight under cover of darkness. The target appears to maintain a reduced security posture at night, and thermal imaging will give us significant advantage. Agreed, Park replied. Hour is set for 1200. That gives us time to conduct detailed planning and rehearsals. Major Hendrix will coordinate overall operation. Lieutenant Kessler will have tactical command of assault elements. Corporal Voss will have authority over precision engagement decisions from her observation post. The briefing continued for 2 hours, covering every aspect of the operation. Approach routes, communication protocols, contingency plans, rules of engagement. Elena absorbed it all, asking questions when appropriate, offering insights based on her surveillance observations. The initial skepticism in the room gradually gave way to professional respect as her knowledge became apparent. After the formal briefing concluded, smaller groups broke off for detailed planning. Elena found herself with Kessler and his team, reviewing the specific layout of the safe house and probable positions of hostile forces. Your observation post will be here. Kessler indicated a position on the map. Same ridgeline we used this morning. 1,500 meters from target. You'll have clear line of sight to all approaches and the structure itself. Your primary mission is surveillance and communication, providing us real-time updates on hostile movement. Secondary mission is precision engagement if hostiles attempt to flee or if assault elements require support. Understood, Elena confirmed. What about Ahmadi specifically? If he attempts to escape, You are authorized to engage. Kessler's voice was firm. But Corporal, we want him alive if possible. He has intelligence value that could save American lives. So unless he's actively threatening coalition forces, your orders are to disable, not kill. Can you do that? The question hung in the air, weighted with implications. Elena understood what Kessler was really asking. Could she wound rather than kill the man responsible for her team's deaths? Could she show restraint when revenge demanded finality? I can make the shot, Elena replied. Whatever shot is required. That's not what I asked. Elena met his gaze. Lieutenant, I've spent 14 months learning to be patient. I can be patient for 14 more seconds if it means we get the intelligence we need. My team died because Ahmadi was smart and ruthless. If capturing him alive means preventing other teams from suffering the same fate, then that's what we do. Kessler studied her face, searching for any hint of deception or instability. Finally, he nodded. All right, I believe you. He turned to his team. Wolf, you'll be my number 2 on the assault. Nakamura, Torres, you've got left and right flanks. We hit them fast and hard before they can organize resistance. The afternoon passed in a blur of preparation and rehearsal. Elena checked and rechecked her equipment, test-fired her rifle to confirm 0, studied the terrain until she could visualize every rock and depression. Other personnel gave her space, sensing the intensity of her focus. As evening approached, she found a quiet corner to sit alone with her thoughts. The photograph of her fallen team was tucked into her vest pocket, close to her heart. She pulled it out, looking at the faces that had become both memory and motivation. Daniels, her spotter, who had taught her to read wind like a language. Ortega, her team leader, who had believed in her potential when others had doubted. Chun, who had been younger than her and full of dreams about life after the Corps. All gone. All because one man had been clever enough to set a perfect trap. Tonight, that man would face justice. Not the impersonal justice of a drone strike or artillery barrage, but the personal, direct justice of professional soldiers executing their duty. Elena would be there, watching through her scope, ready to act when the moment demanded. She returned the photograph to her pocket and stood. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Beautiful and indifferent like the desert itself. In a few hours, violence would shatter the night's peace. Men would fight and bleed and possibly die. And Reza Ahmadi would learn that ghosts he thought buried had returned to haunt him. Elena made her way to the staging area where Kessler's team was conducting final preparations. Wolf looked up as she approached, his earlier skepticism replaced by something approaching camaraderie. Ready for this, Voss? He asked. Been ready for a long time, Sergeant, Elena replied. Kessler checked his watch. 2 hours until we roll. Everyone get some rest, hydrate, and make peace with whatever gods you pray to. He looked around at his assembled team, his expression serious. This is a good op, solid intelligence, clear objectives, proper support. We do this right, we take out a major threat and maybe save some lives down the line. Stay sharp, trust your training, and watch each other's backs. The team dispersed to make final preparations. Elena found a quiet spot and closed her eyes, not sleeping but resting, conserving energy for the long night ahead. Her mind drifted through memories of other operations, other nights waiting for action. She remembered her first combat mission, the terror and exhilaration. She remembered the day she earned her sniper qualification, Ortega's proud smile. She remembered the morning of the ambush, the peace that had preceded the violence. All of it had led to this moment. This mission, this opportunity to close a chapter that had remained painfully open for too long. Elena breathed deeply, centering herself, becoming the weapon she needed to be. Not for revenge, but for justice. Not for herself, but for 7 Marines who would never see another sunrise. The vehicles departed forward operating base Sentinel at 0030, running blacked out through the desert night. Elena rode in the second vehicle with Nakamura and Torres, her rifle secure between her knees, her mind focused on the mission ahead. The landscape rushed past in shades of green through her night vision, familiar now after months of studying maps and imagery. They reached the insertion point at 0 on 15, exactly on schedule. The teams dismounted quickly and efficiently, forming into their designated elements. Kessler's assault team would approach from the south. The Force Recon Cordon would position themselves to cut off northern and eastern escape routes. Elena would climb to her observation post on the western ridgeline, providing overwatch and real-time intelligence. She moved alone toward her position, preferring the solitude for this kind of work. A spotter would have been ideal, but there were not enough personnel for that luxury, and truthfully, she had grown accustomed to working independently. The climb took 30 minutes, her boots finding purchase on loose scree and exposed rock. By 0 on 4 to 5, she was in position with her rifle deployed and her scope scanning the target area. The safe house sat quiet in the darkness, only a single light visible in one window. The generator had been shut down for the night, suggesting the occupants were conserving fuel or were trying to minimize their signature. 2 guards were visible, both on the south side of the structure, sitting near the vehicles and smoking cigarettes. Undisciplined, Elena noted. Their night vision would be compromised by the cigarette glow. Oracle 2 in position, she transmitted quietly. 2 hostile guards visible south side of structure. No other external movement detected. Vanguard 6 copies, Kessler replied. Assault element beginning approach. ETA to breach point 12 minutes. Elena settled into her rifle, feeling the familiar calm descend. This was her element, the place where all her training and experience converged into pure focus. Through her scope, the world contracted to a narrow field of view where everything was calculable, predictable, controllable. The assault team moved like liquid darkness, barely visible even with her night vision. They flowed around terrain features, used shadows for concealment, maintained perfect spacing and formation. Professional operators at the height of their craft. Elena tracked their progress while simultaneously monitoring the safe house for any indication of alert. At 0 to 54, something changed. One of the guards stood abruptly, dropping his cigarette and bringing his rifle to a ready position. He spoke urgently to his companion, gesturing toward the south. The second guard stood as well, both men now alert and scanning the darkness. Vanguard 6, Oracle 2. Hostiles are alerted. Unknown trigger. Recommend immediate assault before they can organize defense. Kessler's response was immediate. All elements, we are compromised. Execute, execute, execute. The night exploded into violence. Flashbang grenades detonated with thunderous reports, their brilliant light temporarily overwhelming night vision equipment. Small arms fire erupted from multiple directions as the assault team engaged the guards. Elena tracked the 2 initial hostiles through her scope. One went down immediately under the coordinated fire. The second managed to get off several rounds before Wolf's precise shooting dropped him. The door to the safe house burst open. A man emerged, firing wildly with an AK-47. Elena's crosshairs found him. Her finger began to squeeze, and the rifle bucked against her shoulder. The hostile dropped, her round taking him in the upper chest. Clean hit, neutralizing the threat without killing him immediately. Multiple hostiles exiting structure, Elena reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. 3, now 4 individuals. Armed and engaging assault element. Kessler's team returned fire with devastating efficiency. The SEALs moved as a unit, each man covering his sector, their shots precise and controlled. 2 more hostiles went down. A third retreated back inside the structure. Elena heard the distinctive reports of M4 carbines, the answering staccato of AK-47s, the shouted commands in both English and Arabic. One hostile attempting to reach vehicles, Elena transmitted. She tracked the runner, a young man sprinting desperately toward the nearest truck. Her crosshairs settled on his leg. The shot required precision at 1,500 meters, compensating for the target's movement and the chaos of the firefight, creating unpredictable variables. She breathed out slowly and fired. The runner collapsed, clutching his shattered knee. Vanguard 6 to Oracle 2, outstanding shooting. Nakamura, secure that hostile. The assault team breached the safe house door with explosive charges. The blast lit up the interior for a brief moment. Then Kessler and Wolf were inside, their weapon lights cutting through the darkness. Elena could hear the muffled sounds of close-quarters combat, shouts and gunfire contained within the structure's walls. Contact inside. Multiple hostiles. Kessler transmitted, his voice tight with combat focus. Torres, cover the back exit. Elena swung her scope to the rear of the building, anticipating escape attempts. Sure enough, a window shattered and a figure emerged, moving with the speed and certainty of someone who had planned this exact scenario. Even in the darkness, Elena recognized the build and movement pattern. Amadi, Vanguard 6, primary target exiting rear of structure. He's running west toward the wadi. On it, Torres replied. But even as he moved to intercept, Elena could see that Amadi had a head start and knew the terrain. He disappeared into a dry creek bed that would provide concealment from ground-level pursuit. Elena made a split-second decision. Her position on the ridgeline gave her an elevated angle into the wadi. She could track Amadi's movement even when he was invisible to the assault team. She transmitted rapidly. Oracle 2 has eyes on target. He's following the wadi northwest. Torres, you're 30 meters behind him and losing ground. The pursuit continued for 2 minutes that felt like hours. Amadi moved with impressive speed for a man in his 40s, using the terrain expertly. Elena tracked him through her scope, calling out his position to guide Torres and now Nakamura, who had joined the chase. But the distance was opening, and in another minute Amadi would reach terrain too broken for effective pursuit. Vanguard 6 to Oracle 2. Kessler's voice cut through the radio traffic. Can you make the shot? Elena's crosshairs settled on Amadi's moving form. The range was extreme, nearly 1,600 meters now and increasing. The target was moving at speed through irregular terrain. Wind conditions were uncertain. The probability of a clean hit was perhaps 30%. The probability of a kill shot even lower. But the probability of Amadi escaping entirely, if she did nothing, was approaching certainty. Orders were to disable if possible, Elena replied. At this range and with target movement, I cannot guarantee non-lethal placement. There was a pause. Then Colonel Park's voice came through, patched in from the operations center. Oracle 2, you are authorized to engage with lethal force. Do not let that target escape. Elena felt time compress. 14 months had led to this moment. All the analysis, all the preparation, all the waiting. Her fallen team's faces flashed through her mind. Daniels, Ortega, Chun, the others. They deserved justice. They deserved the shot. But more than that, future Marines deserved to not face Amadi's tactics. Coalition forces deserved to operate without his deadly expertise targeting them. This was not about revenge. It was about removing a threat, about completing the mission, about doing what she had been trained to do. Elena calculated rapidly. Amadi was moving through a relatively open section of the wadi. In 3 seconds, he would reach cover behind a large boulder. This was her window. She adjusted for distance, for wind, for the target's speed and direction. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate steadied. The rifle became an extension of her will. She fired. The round took nearly 2 seconds to cover the distance. Through her scope, Elena watched Amadi's form continue running for what seemed an eternity. Then he stumbled, fell, tried to rise, and collapsed again. Target is down, Elena reported, unable to confirm kill from this distance. Torres and Nakamura reached Amadi's position within 30 seconds. Torres's voice came over the radio, professional but carrying an undercurrent of amazement. Oracle 2, confirm 1 hostile down. He's hit, but he's alive. Right shoulder. Clean rough hand throw. He's not going anywhere. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, processing what she had done. An impossible shot under extreme conditions. She had aimed for center mass, and the variables had shifted the impact point to the shoulder. Luck or skill or divine intervention, it did not matter. Amadi was down and alive. Outstanding work, Oracle 2. Colonel Park's voice carried genuine respect. Outstanding work. The firefight at the safe house had concluded. Kessler reported 3 hostile combatants killed. For wounded and secured, no friendly casualties. The building was being searched for intelligence materials. Amadi was being treated by the team's medic and prepared for transport back to base. Elena remained in her observation post, watching as the operation transitioned to cleanup and documentation phase. Vehicles were moved into position. Wounded hostiles were secured and treated. The dead were searched and photographed. Professional soldiers conducting professional work in the aftermath of violence. She felt strange. Not the elation she had expected, not the satisfaction of revenge completed. Instead, there was a profound weariness, as if a weight she had been carrying for 14 months had suddenly been removed, leaving her feeling oddly hollow. Vanguard 6 to Oracle 2, you are clear to return to base. Transport is standing by at your extraction point. Roger that, Elena replied. Oracle 2 moving. She secured her rifle and began the descent from the ridgeline. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, the first hint of dawn approaching. By the time the sun rose, they would be back at forward operating base Sentinel. Amadi would be in custody, being processed and prepared for interrogation. The man responsible for so much death and suffering would face justice through proper channels. And Elena Voss, the sniper who had refused to let injury or bureaucracy or time diminish her capabilities, had fired the shot that brought him down. Not for revenge, though that was part of it. Not for glory, though recognition would likely follow. She had done it because it was her mission, her duty, her purpose. As she reached the extraction point and climbed into the waiting vehicle, Elena felt the accumulated exhaustion of the long night finally catching up to her. But underneath the fatigue was something else. Peace, perhaps, or at least the beginning of it. The ghosts that had haunted her for 14 months could finally rest. She had honored their memory in the only way that mattered, through professional excellence and unwavering determination. Dawn broke over forward operating base Sentinel as the convoy rolled through the wire. Elena sat in silence during the ride back, watching the desert landscape transform from darkness into the harsh light of morning. Around her, Kessler's team maintained the quiet alertness that followed combat operations, each man processing the night's events in his own way. No one spoke unnecessarily. Words would come later, during debriefings and after-action reviews. For now, survival and mission success were enough. The base stirred to life as they arrived. Personnel emerging from sleeping quarters paused to watch the convoy, sensing from the team's bearing that something significant had occurred. Elena dismounted from her vehicle, her legs stiff from hours of immobility and a long night. She secured her rifle and prepared to head to the armory when Colonel Park approached, accompanied by Major Hendricks. Corporal Voss, Park said without preamble. Exceptional work last night. That shot you made, 1,600 meters on a moving target in darkness. That's the kind of shooting people will be talking about for years. You saved this operation. Elena straightened to attention, unsure how to respond to such direct praise. I was doing my job, ma'am. The team did the hard work. I just provided support. Park's expression softened slightly. Humility is admirable, but false humility is tedious. You made an impossible shot when it counted most. Take the compliment, Corporal. Thank you, ma'am. Hendricks stepped forward. After you've secured your weapon and cleaned up, get some rest. We'll conduct the formal debrief at 1600. He paused, studying her face. How are you feeling? The question carried layers of meaning. Elena considered carefully before answering. Tired, sir. Relieved. Ready for what comes next. Good answer, Hendricks replied. He lowered his voice slightly. Amadi is in medical receiving treatment. Once he's stable, he'll be transferred to interrogation. I wanted you to know that he's asking questions about who shot him. He seems impressed by the marksmanship. Elena felt a cold satisfaction at that information. She had spent 14 months as a ghost hunting another ghost. Now Amadi knew that someone with extraordinary skill had tracked him down. Good, she said simply. Let him wonder. Park and Hendricks departed, leaving Elena to process her weapon through the armory. The armorer, a grizzled staff sergeant named Kowalski, examined her rifle with professional interest. "Heard you made quite a shot last night," he commented while inspecting the barrel. 1,600 meters, they're saying. In the dark. On a runner. Something like that, Elena confirmed. Kowalski whistled low. "I've been working with weapons for 23 years, and I can count on one hand the number of shooters I've met who could make that shot." He looked up at her with new respect. "You're something special, Corporal." "Just lucky," Elena deflected. "Luck is what happens when skill meets opportunity," Kowalski replied, quoting an old military aphorism. "You had both last night." He finished his inspection and logged her weapon properly. "Get some rest. You've earned it." Elena made her way to her quarters, moving through a base that suddenly felt different. Personnel who had barely acknowledged her existence now nodded respectfully as she passed. Word had spread quickly, as it always did in close quarters. The quiet analyst who worked in the intelligence tent had turned out to be a sniper of remarkable capability. The story would grow with each retelling, but the core truth would remain. In her sleeping quarters, Elena finally allowed herself to remove her gear and sit on her bunk. Her roommates were on duty elsewhere, giving her the rare gift of solitude. She pulled the photograph of her team from her vest pocket and studied the faces once more. 7 Marines, all smiling, all alive in that frozen moment of time. "We got him," she whispered to the photograph. "It's done." But even as she spoke the words, Elena recognized they were not entirely true. Almaty was captured, yes. Justice would be served through interrogation and imprisonment. But the 7 faces staring back at her from the photograph were still gone. No amount of successful missions or impossible shots could bring them back. The victory felt hollow in ways she had not anticipated. Elena lay back on her bunk, intending to rest for just a few minutes before showering. Instead, exhaustion claimed her immediately, pulling her down into deep, dreamless sleep that was both mercy and necessity. She woke 6 hours later to find Nakamura sitting quietly near the entrance to the quarters, apparently standing an unofficial watch to ensure no one disturbed her. He looked up when she stirred. "Figured you could use uninterrupted rack time," he said. "Half the base has been trying to come by to congratulate you. I've been running interference." "Thank you," Elena said sincerely. "That was kind." Nakamura shrugged. "You saved Torres and me from a long foot chase last night. Least I could do." He stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, what you did out there, that was professional work. Not revenge shooting. Everyone can tell the difference." After he left, Elena showered and changed into a fresh uniform. The debrief was scheduled for 1600, giving her time to grab a proper meal and review her own notes from the operation. The mess hall was crowded when she entered, and conversations paused as she made her way through the serving line. She felt the weight of attention, but ignored it, collecting her food and finding an empty corner table. Kessler approached before she had taken 3 bites. "Mind if we join you?" Elena gestured to the empty seats. Kessler, Wolf, Torres, and Nakamura all settled around the table, creating an island of conversation in the busy mess hall. "Want to go over anything before the formal debrief?" Kessler asked. "Make sure our stories align." "Our stories should align because they're true," Elena replied. "I don't see any need for coordination beyond accuracy." Wolf grinned. "She's right, LT. We all saw what happened. Straightforward operation, professionally executed, successful outcome. What's the spin?" The conversation shifted to technical discussion of the operation, analyzing decisions made and lessons learned. Elena found herself relaxing into the familiar rhythm of professional soldiers dissecting their work. This was what she had missed during her time behind the desk, the camaraderie that came from shared danger and shared purpose. At 15:45, they made their way to the operations center for the formal debrief. The room was set up with Colonel Park, Major Hendricks, and several other senior officers present. A court reporter sat ready to document everything for the official record. The debrief took 2 hours, with each team member providing their perspective on the operation. Elena's turn came last. She walked through her observations, her shot decisions, her communications with the assault team. When she reached the final engagement with Amati, Colonel Park interrupted. Corporal Voss, you are authorized to use lethal force. Your shot placement resulted in a wounded but living target. Was that intentional or fortunate accident? Elena considered the question carefully. Ma'am, at that range with those variables, precise shot placement is as much probability as intent. I am center mass for the highest likelihood of hitting the target. The impact point being non-lethal was a combination of factors including distance, wind, target movement, and yes, some element of chance. That said, I'm satisfied with the outcome. The target was neutralized and captured alive, providing intelligence value. Park nodded. Well said. The shot itself, regardless of outcome, was extraordinary. You should be proud of your work. The debrief concluded with commendations noted for the official record. Kessler received recognition for leadership under fire. Each team member was cited for professional performance, and Elena received specific commendation for mission-critical precision engagement under extreme conditions. As they filed out of the operations center, Hendricks pulled Elena aside. There's someone who wants to meet you, if you're willing. Elena's stomach tightened. Who? Amati. He's been asking about the sniper who shot him. He wants to know who made that shot. Hendricks watched her face carefully. You're under no obligation to meet with him, but I thought you should have the option. Elena's first instinct was refusal. What could possibly be gained from such a meeting? But then she remembered something her team leader, Ortega, had told her years ago. Understanding your enemy makes you more effective. She had spent 14 months studying Amati from a distance. Perhaps there was value in confronting him directly. I'll meet with him, Elena decided. On my terms, in a controlled environment. Hendricks nodded. Tomorrow morning, 0900. He'll be restrained and under guard. You'll have full control of the conversation. If you want to leave at any point, you leave. No questions asked. That evening, Elena sat alone in the intelligence tent, staring at her screens without really seeing them. Tomorrow she would face the man who had killed her team. Not through a rifle scope, but face to face, human to human. Part of her wanted to refuse, to maintain the distance that had kept her focused for so long. But another part needed this meeting, needed to look into the eyes of the man who had caused so much pain and understand what motivated such violence. Outside, the sun set in brilliant colors across the desert sky. Another day ending, another night beginning. Elena thought about the strange path that had led her to this moment. From survivor to analyst to sniper again. From victim to hunter to something more complex that defied simple categorization. She touched the photograph in her pocket, drawing strength from the faces she had memorized long ago. Whatever tomorrow brought, whatever came from meeting Amati face to face, she would face it as they had taught her. With courage, with discipline, and with the unwavering commitment to doing what was right rather than what was easy. The interrogation facility occupied a concrete structure at the far edge of forward operating base Sentinel, deliberately isolated from the main compound. Elena approached at 0850, accompanied by Major Hendricks and 2 military police guards. Her stomach churned with emotions she could not quite name. Anticipation mixed with dread. Curiosity wrapped in anger. The desire for closure competing with the fear that no such thing truly existed. Hendricks paused at the entrance. Remember, you're in control here. He can't hurt you. He's restrained and monitored. If this becomes too much, just walk out. I understand, sir, Elena replied, her voice steadier than she felt. They passed through 2 security checkpoints before reaching the interrogation room. Through a one-way mirror, Elena could see Reza Amati sitting at a metal table, his right shoulder heavily bandaged, his wrists shackled to a bolt in the floor. He looked smaller than she had expected, more ordinary. Not the monster from her nightmares, but simply a middle-aged man who had made a career of violence. He's been compliant, Hendricks explained. No resistance, no demands. Just keeps asking about who shot him. Says he's never seen marksmanship like that. Elena studied Amati's face, comparing it to the photographs she had memorized. The same calculating eyes, but now carrying something else. Respect, perhaps, or professional curiosity. She took a deep breath. I'm ready. The door opened, and Elena entered alone, as she had requested. Almaty looked up, his expression shifting from neutral waiting to genuine surprise. His eyes traveled from her face to the corporal stripes on her uniform, then back to her face. "You," he said in accented but clear English. "You're the one who shot me?" Elena took the chair across from him, maintaining eye contact. "I am." Almaty leaned back slightly, wincing at the movement that pulled his wounded shoulder. "A woman." He shook his head slowly. "I have fought coalition forces for 6 years. I have faced their best snipers, their most skilled operators. And it is a woman, a corporal, who makes the shot that ends my freedom." He paused. That is either irony or justice. Perhaps both. Elena felt anger rising, but kept her voice level. "You killed 7 Marines 14 months ago. Checkpoint Griffin. Do you remember?" Almaty's expression became more guarded. "I remember many operations, many battles. The nature of war is that soldiers die. These weren't just soldiers," Elena continued. "They were reconnaissance Marines, a scout sniper team. You ambushed them in the mountains north of here, set up a perfect kill zone. They never had a chance." Something flickered across Almaty's face. Recognition, or perhaps calculation. "The team in the valley. Yes, I remember. It was a successful operation. They had been tracking my movements for weeks. I simply tracked them in return." He met her gaze directly. "You were part of that team?" "I was a spotter. I survived. The others didn't." Elena reached in her pocket and pulled out the photograph, sliding it across the table. "These were the people you killed. Not statistics. Not targets. People." Almaty looked at the photograph for a long moment. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable. "In war, we all kill people. I do not enjoy this fact, but I do not apologize for it either. Your forces invaded my country. My people. I fight to defend them." He gestured to the photograph. "These Marines, they also were fighting for what they believed was right. We were soldiers on opposite sides. That is the tragedy of war. Don't you dare compare yourself to them." Elena's voice hardened. "They operated under rules of engagement. They showed restraint. They try to minimize civilian casualties. You hide behind civilians. You use them as shields. And your drones kill entire families," Almaty countered. "Your artillery destroys neighborhoods. Do not lecture me about morality when your government wages war from the sky and calls the dead acceptable collateral damage." He leaned forward despite the restraints. "I know what you think of me. Terrorist. Insurgent. Monster. But I'm a soldier, same as you. I simply have fewer resources and less powerful friends." Elena struggled to control her emotions. The conversation was not going as she had anticipated. She had expected defiance or cruelty, not this calm philosophical debate about the nature of war. "You're trying to justify murder." "I am explaining context," Almaty replied. "Something your superiors rarely bother with." He studied her face carefully. "You spent 14 months hunting me, yes? Learning my patterns, my tactics, my methods. Tell me, in all that time, did you ever ask yourself why I fight? What drives a man to risk everything, year after year, knowing he will eventually be killed or captured?" Elena said nothing, unwilling to engage with his reasoning. Almaty continued anyway. "I fight because I watched coalition bombs destroy my brother's home. Because I saw my niece die in a hospital that had no medicine due to sanctions. Because every drone strike that kills an innocent child creates 10 new fighters willing to die for revenge." He paused. "You think you are the hero of this story, and perhaps in your narrative you are. But I am the hero of mine. We are all heroes in our own stories." The word struck Elena harder than she expected. She had spent so long reducing Almaty to a simple villain that the complexity of his motivations felt like an unwelcome intrusion. "My team died because you ambushed them. That's not a narrative, that's a fact." "Yes," Almaty agreed. "And I was almost killed because you tracked me with exceptional skill and patience. Also a fact." He shifted in his chair, grimacing at the pain. "The shot you made, 1,600 meters, moving target, darkness. I have trained snipers for years, and none could make that shot." "How'd you do it?" Elena was caught off guard by the technical question. "Why do you want to know?" "Professional curiosity." I respect skill, even in my enemies. Especially in my enemies. Amadi's expression showed genuine interest. You overcame impossible variables. Wind, distance, movement, limited visibility. And still you hit me. Not center mass where you aimed, but close enough. That speaks to extraordinary training or extraordinary talent. Which is it? Both, Elena found herself answering. In 14 months of motivation. Ah, Amadi no dead. Revenge. That is the greatest motivator of all. It drives us to exceed our limitations, to become more than we thought possible. He met her eyes. You wanted me dead. Your shot hit my shoulder, not my heart. Accident or mercy? The question echoed Colonel Park's inquiry from the debrief. Elena considered her answer carefully. Accident, she said. At that range, precise placement is probability, not certainty. I think you're lying, Amadi said quietly. I think some part of you, trained in discipline and rules of engagement, wanted to capture rather than kill, even though killing would have given you the revenge you sought. He nodded slowly. That makes you the better soldier. Revenge controlled rather than controlling is a rare quality. Elena felt uncomfortable with his analysis, with the idea that this man understood her better than she might understand herself. I came here to see the man who killed my team, to understand why. I don't think I'm going to get a satisfactory answer. Because there is no answer that will satisfy you, Amadi replied. Your team died in war. My people, the Inva. We are caught in a cycle that neither of us started, but both of us perpetuate through our actions. His voice softened slightly. I am sorry for your loss. Not sorry that I did my duty as I saw it, but sorry that war creates such loss. If that distinction means anything to you. Elena stood abruptly. I've heard enough. Before you go, Amadi called out. One more thing. The other members of your team in the photograph. What are their names? The question stopped Elena at the door. Why? Because if I am to carry the weight of their deaths, I should know their names. It is the least I can do. Elena turned back, studying his face for any hint of mockery or manipulation. Finding none, she recited the names slowly, giving each fallen Marine their moment of recognition. Corporal Marcus Daniels, Staff Sergeant Isabel Ortega, Private First Class David Chun, Lance Corporal Anthony Rodriguez, Sergeant James Murphy, Corporal Lisa Harrison, Private Sam Williams. Amadi listened to each name, then bowed his head slightly. I will remember them. I promise you that. Elena left the room, her emotions in turmoil. The conversation had given her none of the closure she had hoped for, and instead had raised uncomfortable questions about the nature of their conflict. Hendricks was waiting in the observation room. How do you feel? He asked. Confused, Elena admitted. I wanted him to be a monster. It would have been easier that way. Monsters are rarely just monsters, Hendricks replied. That's what makes war so difficult. We fight people, not caricatures. He put a hand on her shoulder. What you did, tracking him down, making that shot, that was justice. Imperfect and complicated, but justice nonetheless. Don't let his words take that away from you. Elena nodded, but Hendricks's reassurance felt hollow. Something had shifted in the interrogation room, some understanding that she could not quite articulate. She had come face to face with her enemy and found not a demon, but a man with his own justifications, his own pain, his own sense of duty. It did not excuse what Amadi had done. It did not erase the deaths of her team, but it complicated the simple narrative of good versus evil that she had maintained for 14 months. And in that complication, Elena felt something beginning to change, some hardness in her heart starting to soften into something more complex and more human. The days following Elena's meeting with Amadi passed in a strange blur of routine and recognition. Word of her confrontation with the captured insurgent leader had spread through the base, adding another layer to her growing reputation. Personnel who had dismissed her as merely a desk analyst now treated her with the complex respect reserved for warriors who had faced their enemies not just through violence, but through understanding. Elena threw herself into work, analyzing the intelligence gathered from Amadi's safe house. Documents, communications equipment, maps marked with planned operations. Each piece revealed the extent of his network and the sophistication of his resistance cell. The information would save lives, disrupt enemy operations, and justify the risk taken to capture rather than kill him. But the work could not fully occupy her mind. Ahmadi's words echoed in her thoughts during quiet moments. His challenge to her narrative. His insistence that he too was a soldier fighting for what he believed. The uncomfortable recognition that war created victims and villains on all sides, and the categories were never as clear as propaganda suggested. On the third day after the interrogation, Kessler found Elena in the intelligence tent late in the evening. She was alone, as had become her habit, studying reports by the blue glow of her monitors. "You've been avoiding people," he observed, pulling up a chair beside her. "I've been working," Elena corrected. "You've been hiding," Kessler countered gently. "Ever since you talked to Ahmadi. Want to discuss what happened in there?" Elena was quiet for a moment, organizing her thoughts. "He wasn't what I expected. I wanted him to be cruel, unrepentant, someone I could hate without complication. Instead, he was professional, articulate, and disturbingly rational about why he fights." "That bothers you," Kessler said. "It was not a question." "It complicates things," Elena admitted. "For 14 months, I've been driven by a clear sense of purpose. Track down the man who killed my team and bring him to justice. Simple, direct. Now I've accomplished that, and instead of feeling satisfied, I feel unsettled." Kessler leaned back in his chair. "I've been doing this job for 12 years. I've captured or killed more enemies than I can count. And you know what I've learned? The ones who are easy to hate are rarely the ones who matter. It's the competent ones, the professionals, the ones who could have been on our side in different circumstances. Those are the ones who stick with you." "Did you ever talk to any of them?" Elena asked. "After capturing them?" "A few," Kessler acknowledged. "And every conversation complicated my understanding of what we're doing here. It doesn't change the mission, but it changes how you process it." He met her eyes. "What Ahmadi said to you, about both sides being heroes in their own stories, that's not wrong. It's just incomplete. The difference is in how we fight, the rules we follow, the restraint we show. We're not perfect, but we try to be better." "You remember my team's names?" Elena said quietly. "I told him who they were, and he promised to remember them. I don't know what to do with that." "Honor it," Kessler replied. "He gave your team something they deserve, recognition as individuals rather than statistics. That's more than most enemies would do." He paused. "Elena, you accomplished something remarkable. You tracked down a highly skilled opponent, you made an impossible shot, and you brought him alive so his knowledge could save American lives. That's not just revenge, that's professional excellence. Don't let his words diminish what you achieved." "I don't think they diminish it," Elena said slowly. "I think they just make it more real. Less like a movie where the hero gets the villain and everything is resolved. More like actual war, where nothing is ever simple." "Welcome to the complicated reality of being a warrior," Kessler said with a slight smile. "It sucks, but it's honest." Over the following days, Elena found herself gradually rejoining the social fabric of the base. She ate meals with Kessler's team, engaged in the casual banter that helped soldiers process stress, and slowly stopped isolating herself in the intelligence tent. The photograph of her fallen team remained in her pocket, but she found herself looking at it less frequently, the faces becoming memory rather than open-wound. Colonel Park summoned her on the 7th day after Ahmadi's capture. Elena reported to the commander's office with some trepidation, unsure what to expect. Park gestured to a chair and dismissed her aide, leaving them alone. "Corporal Voss, I've been reviewing your performance over the past months. Your intelligence analysis has been consistently exceptional. Your return to field operations demonstrated capabilities that exceed standard expectations. And your handling of the Ahmadi situation, both the capture and the interrogation, shows maturity beyond your rank." "Thank you, ma'am," Elena replied cautiously. "Which is why I'm recommending you for promotion to sergeant and offering you a choice," Park continued. "You can remain here in an expanded role, training other analysts and occasionally participating in field operations. Or you can return to the reconnaissance community full-time, where your skills as a sniper are clearly still exceptional despite your injury." Elena felt her breath catch. The choice she had thought was made for her by the medical board was suddenly open again. She could reclaim her identity as a sniper, return to the work she had trained for and excelled at. Or she could continue evolving into something new, a hybrid role that combined analytical work with operational capability. "Can I have time to consider, ma'am?" "Take a week," Park replied. "This is not a decision to make lightly. Talk to people you trust. Think about what will serve you and the Corps best." She leaned forward slightly. "For what it's worth, I've seen a lot of Marines over my career. The best ones aren't the ones who can do one thing brilliantly. They're the ones who can adapt, who can grow into new roles while maintaining their core competencies. You've demonstrated that capability. Whatever you choose, you'll excel at it." That evening, Elena climbed to a high point on the base perimeter where she could watch the sunset. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and harsh in equal measure. She thought about her journey from the ambush that nearly killed her to this moment of unexpected choice. About the team she had lost and the new team she had found. About revenge and justice and the complicated space between them. Her secure phone buzzed. A message from Major Hendricks. Amadi had completed his initial interrogation and was being transferred to a more secure facility for long-term detention. His information had already led to the disruption of 3 planned attacks and the capture of 7 additional insurgent leaders. The operation that Elena had initiated with her patient analysis and impossible shot had cascading effects that would save countless lives. Elena pulled out the photograph of her team one more time. 7 faces forever young, forever frozen in that moment before tragedy. She had carried them with her through 14 months of grief and determination. She had honored them by refusing to quit, by maintaining her standards, by becoming more than what injury had tried to reduce her to. But perhaps it was time to carry them differently. Not as a weight demanding vengeance, but as a reminder of the values they had embodied. Courage, excellence, service, the willingness to do difficult things because they needed doing. She thought about Amadi's question during their meeting, about whether her shot had been accident or mercy. Elena had said accident, but perhaps he had been right to doubt that answer. Perhaps some part of her, trained in discipline and rules of engagement, had made a choice in that fraction of a second. To wound rather than kill. To capture rather than execute. To choose justice over revenge. The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and red. Elena stood and made her way back toward the main compound. She had a week to make her decision, but already she felt the answer forming. She would not go back to being only a sniper, defined by a single skill, no matter how exceptional. She would continue evolving, adapting, becoming something new that honored both her past and her future. Staff Sergeant Isabel Ortega had once told her that the mark of a great Marine was not refusing to change, but choosing how to change. Elena understood that wisdom now in ways she could not have before. War had broken her, but she had used the pieces to build something stronger, more complex, more capable than what existed before. Tomorrow she would write recommendations based on Amadi's intelligence. She would train junior analysts on pattern recognition. She would maintain her marksmanship, because excellence demanded maintenance. And she would keep moving forward, carrying her fallen team not as ghosts demanding vengeance, but as inspiration demanding honor through continued service. The stars began emerging in the darkening sky, the same stars that had witnessed countless acts of violence and courage throughout human history. Elena looked up at them and felt something she had not experienced in 14 months. Not closure, because there was no such thing. Not satisfaction, because the dead remained dead. But perhaps acceptance. Perhaps peace with the understanding that she had done what needed doing and done it well. 3 weeks had passed since the operation that captured Reza Amadi and Forward Operating Base Sentinel had settled back into its routine rhythms of deployment life. Elena stood in the intelligence tent, now wearing the chevrons of a sergeant, briefing a group of junior analysts on pattern recognition techniques. The transformation from isolated desk worker to respected instructor had happened gradually, almost imperceptibly, until one day she realized that people no longer saw her as the quiet corporal hiding from her past, but as someone whose experience and expertise were actively sought. The briefing concluded, and Elena dismissed her students with reading assignments and analysis exercises. As they filed out, Kessler entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her with a knowing smile. "Heard you made your decision," he said. "Staying here in the hybrid role. Training analysts, occasional field ops. Good choice." "It felt right," Elena replied, accepting the coffee. "I spent so long trying to get back to who I was before the injury. I finally realized I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to be this person. Someone who can do both." Kisla noted. "The Corps needs more people who can bridge the gap between intelligence and operations. You've proven that capability better than anyone I've seen." He paused. "Got a minute? There's something you should see." Elena followed him outside into the bright morning sun. They walked toward the helicopter pad, where a Black Hawk was being prepared for departure. Major Hendricks stood nearby, supervising the loading of equipment and personnel. "Amadi is being transferred today," Kessler explained. "Final move to long-term detention facility." Hendricks thought you might want to know. Elena watched as military police escorted a shackled figure toward the helicopter. Even at this distance, she recognized Amadi's posture and bearing. He moved with dignity despite his restraints. His wounded shoulder apparently healed enough for travel. "Do you want to say anything to him?" Kessler asked. "Last chance." Elena considered the question. What would she say? "Thank you for the lessons about complexity? I'm sorry we're enemies?" The conversations in her head seemed inadequate for the reality of the moment. "No," she decided. "We said everything that needed saying." But as if sensing her presence, Amadi turned and looked directly at her across the distance. Their eyes met for a long moment. He raised his shackled hands slightly, a gesture that could have been acknowledgement or farewell or respect. Elena found herself nodding in return, a small recognition of the strange connection forged between hunter and hunted. The helicopter lifted off moments later, its rotors beating the air as it climbed and banked south. Elena watched until it became a distant speck against the blue sky, carrying away the man who had occupied so much of her thoughts for 14 months. "That's it, then," Kessler observed. Chapter closed. Elena shook her head slightly. "Not closed, just finished. There's a difference." They walked back toward the operations center, passing knots of personnel going about their daily tasks. Elena noticed how many of them nodded or waved as she passed, simple gestures of respect that would have been unthinkable when she first arrived at this base. She had earned her place here not through rank or connections, but through demonstrated competence and unwavering determination. Major Hendricks intercepted them before they reached the operations center. "Sergeant Voss, got an assignment for you if you're interested. We've received intelligence about a suspected weapons cache in Sector 9-2. Needs analysis to determine if it warrants investigation. Thought you might want first look." Elena smiled. The work continued. It always continued. "I'll have preliminary analysis ready by 1400, sir." After Hendricks departed, Elena returned to her tent and pulled up the intelligence files on her computer. But before diving into the work, she opened her desk drawer and retrieved the photograph of her team. 7 faces, 7 lives cut short, 7 reasons why she did what she did every day. She studied each face one more time, then carefully placed the photograph in an envelope along with a letter she had written the night before. The letter explained what had happened, how their sacrifice had not been forgotten, how their teammate had honored them by refusing to quit. She addressed the envelope to the Marine Corps Archives, where it would be filed with official records of the Checkpoint Griffin incident. It was time to let them rest properly. Elena sealed the envelope and set it aside for mailing, feeling a weight lift that she had carried for so long it had become part of her identity. The grief remained, would always remain, but it no longer defined her. She was more than a survivor seeking vengeance. She was a Marine continuing to serve with excellence and purpose. Her phone buzzed with a message from Wolf. "Team dinner tonight at 1900. Mandatory attendance. Torres is cooking, so bring antacids." Elena laughed, and typed back her confirmation. This was her team now, not replacing the one she had lost, but existing alongside that memory. Brothers and sisters in arms who had accepted her first as an analyst, then as an operator, and finally as family. The afternoon passed in focused analysis. Elena pored over surveillance reports and communications intercepts, building a picture of the suspected weapons cache and its likely contents. By 1400, she had a comprehensive briefing ready for Hendricks, complete with recommended courses of action and risk assessments. The work was engaging, challenging, exactly what she needed to stay sharp. That evening, Elena made her way to the makeshift recreation area where Kessler's team had set up their dinner gathering. Torres had somehow procured ingredients for something resembling actual food rather than mess hall rations, and the smell of grilled meat filled the air. Nakamura was attempting to teach Wolf a card game with rules that seemed to change every hand. The sergeant arrives, Wolf announced as Elena approached. And just in time, Torres claims this mystery meat is chicken, but I have my doubts. It's chicken, Torres insisted. Probably. Mostly. Don't ask too many questions. Elena accepted a plate and settled into the circle of operators, feeling the easy camaraderie that came from shared dangers and mutual respect. They talked about everything and nothing, swapping stories and insults with the casual affection of people who trusted each other with their lives. As the evening progressed and the sun began its descent toward the horizon, conversation turned more reflective. Kessler raised his canteen in a toast to Sergeant Voss, who proved that the best operators aren't always the ones who never get hurt. Sometimes they're the ones who get hurt and refuse to let it define them. The team echoed the toast, and Elena felt emotion tighten her throat. Thank you, she managed. All of you. For giving me a chance when I was just the analyst in the tent. For trusting me when it mattered most. You earned it, Nakamura replied simply. Every bit of it. As darkness fell and stars emerged overhead, Elena found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the ambush that nearly killed her to the long months of recovery and determination. From the isolation of revenge-focused analysis to the complexity of understanding her enemy as a human being. From broken sniper to something new and perhaps better, a warrior who could fight with both mind and rifle, who understood that strength came not from invulnerability, but from the willingness to continue despite wounds. If you enjoyed this story, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part or character. Maybe you've witnessed similar strength and resilience in someone you know, or perhaps this story reminded you of the quiet warriors who serve without seeking recognition. Share your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. Later, walking back to her quarters under the vast canopy of stars, Elena pulled out her phone and composed a final message. It was addressed to no one in particular, perhaps to herself, perhaps to the universe. She typed slowly, choosing each word with care. I set out to hunt a ghost and found a man. I sought revenge and discovered justice is more complicated than I imagined. I wanted to go back to who I was before and learn to become someone better. The mission is complete, but the work continues. And that's exactly how it should be. She saved the message in her notes without sending it. A private marker for a journey completed and a new path beginning. Then she continued walking, a Marine who had learned that the hardest victories were not over external enemies, but over the limitations and pain within ourselves. Above, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, bearing witness to one small story among countless others. A story of loss and determination, of revenge transmuted into justice, of a warrior who refused to be defined by her wounds. The desert wind whispered across the base, carrying with it the promise of another day, another mission, another opportunity to serve with honor and excellence. Elena Voss, once broken, now whole in ways that transcended her former self, walked into that future with steady steps and clear purpose. The ghosts of her past walked beside her no longer as burdens, but as inspiration. And somewhere in the darkness, other warriors prepared for their own battles, their own journeys of pain and redemption, their own discoveries that true strength came not from never falling, but from rising every time the fall occurred. The story ended not with dramatic finality, but with quiet continuation, because that was the nature of service, of duty, of the warrior's path. There were no final victories, only the daily choice to continue, to excel, to honor those who had fallen by living with purpose and dedication. And Elena Voss, sergeant of Marines, sniper and analyst, hunter and student of complexity, had made that choice. Every day, in every action, in every breath. The mission continued. She continued. And that was enough.